All right, guys. Hey, how are you? Today we're going to continue working our chapter 11, which has to do with geometry, and we're going to be focusing on polygons once again. Okay, but for today's lessons, we're going to take a break from the other I would say 7 polygons that we're going to be working on in chapter 11. We're going to focus on triangles. Okay, and a triangle is the smallest amount of sides and angles. It's a polygon with the least amount of sides and angles possible, which a triangle has 3 sides and 3 angles. Okay, and then we're gonna get in specific of different types of triangles because there are different types of polygons, and then once you identify that polygon, there are different types of specific types of that polygon. In this case, we're gonna be talking about 3 different types of triangles that we have. Okay, so a triangle, like we know, is a 3-sided polygon, right? Has 3 sides, 3 vertices, and 3 angles. And then we focus on, once we have that triangle, to get a specific, to identify it more specifically, we're going to be identifying it by the amount of, by the sides and by the angle. Okay, so let's talk about first, we have our angle. So if we look right here, okay, going from left to right, here are 3 types of triangles that we'll be classifying by their sides. So we have our one on the left, and with the red font, we have an equilateral triangle. An equilateral triangle is a triangle that has all congruent sides. So if you look at the example here, all sides on the equilateral are 4 inches. Okay, so that would be, so this triangle right here would be considered an equilateral triangle just by having all congruent sides. So that is our first one. So an equilateral triangle has 3 congruent sides. Now our next one is called our isosceles triangle. An isosceles triangle. What does an isosceles triangle have? It's very similar to the equilateral with the exception of one side that is not congruent. So if you look at the isosceles triangle example I have here, if you notice that 2 sides are congruent. In this case, they are both 8 inches. But if I look at the bottom one, it is 3 inches. So an isosceles triangle has 2 sides of the same length, or 2 congruent sides. And that is how you classify an isosceles triangle, by identifying it by having 2 congruent sides. And last but not least, we have a scalene triangle. A scalene triangle. And a scalene triangle, as you can see the example, if you're catching the pattern here, a scalene triangle has no sides congruent. So it is a triangle that has all of its 3 sides, each have a different length. So if you look at the example, on this bottom one right here, we have 7 inches. The one opposite of it would be 8 inches, and then we have one of 4 inches. Okay, so this would be considered a scalene triangle. So that is how we classify a triangle based on its sides. So when you want to classify a triangle by its sides, it can either be an equilateral triangle, an isosceles triangle, or a scalene triangle. Okay, so now we're going to move on. We're going to focus on classifying triangles by their angles. And what is an angle? Remember, the angle is the space between, right? So it would be the space between, right, 2 lines, right, or 2 intersecting lines. So if we look at here we have 3 different types of classifications of triangles by their angles, and they are acute, right, and obtuse. And I hope we all remember from Ms. Rodriguez's class last year, we all know about angles, right? We have our acute, so think of something cute, like a cute little puppy. Acute would be a small, right? Acute would be smaller, right? Would be smaller than 90 degrees, right? So an acute angle is anything that is smaller than 90 degrees. So it has a little tiny curve, right? Then we have our right angle. Our right angle is equal to exactly 90 degrees, and it would have a straight box, right? It would have like a boxy look. Once you see a boxy look here, right, that would be a symbol to represent a 90-degree angle. Okay, and then we have our biggest angle, which would be anything greater than 90 degrees, greater than 90, so 91 and up, which would be called our obtuse angles. Our obtuse angles, those would be anything greater than 90 degrees. So now we've identified them by sides. Now let's break down how to identify triangles based on their degrees. So let's start off with our first one on the left, right? Here we have an acute triangle. And what makes something an acute triangle? An acute triangle is when there are all three angles are smaller than 90 degrees, okay? Time out, sorry, I forgot. Before I continue, one thing about polygons is depending on the amount of shapes, will tell you the amount of degrees they have total. So if you guys remember the PowerPoint presentation that I gave on the first lesson, every polygon has a specific amount of degrees. No matter how much you add up the triangles, the polygon, it'll give you the exact degree needed for that polygon. So the total number of the total degrees for a triangle is 180 degrees. Every triangle, no matter what, it never fails. Every triangle will always be 180 degrees. Okay, so let's hold that, and I'll show you guys as we go along. So let's look at our acute angle. Let's look at this acute angle right here. An acute angle is a triangle with all of its angles are smaller than a right angle, which a right angle is 90 degrees. So every angle is smaller or less than 90 degrees. Okay, so if you look at this acute angle, it has this one, this angle right here, which would be 50 degrees. It has another angle of 60 degrees, and it has another angle of 70 degrees. Every angle is less than 90 degrees, so it'll automatically make it an acute angle. Okay, and now let's look over here. Let's go back to my 180 degrees. If I add 70 degrees plus 60 degrees plus 50 degrees, I would get 7 plus 6 is 13, plus 5 is 180, which will give me a total of 180 degrees. Never fails. All right. So now let's move on to our next one, which is our right angle. And the right angle is the easiest triangle, in my opinion, to identify. If you see this little box, look at that. If you see that little box there and it doesn't have a number, it'll automatically identify it as a right angle because it'll have a 90-degree angle. So if you see an angle that is 90 degrees, it'll automatically make it a 90-degree angle. Doesn't matter what the other two are, as long as it has a 90-degree angle, it is a right triangle. So now let's go back to our 180 degrees. If I have 90 plus 60 plus 30, right? 0 plus 0 plus 0, 9 plus 6 is 15, plus 3 is 180. Oops, right? So it gives me 180 degrees again. So no matter what, if you add up all of the triangles, all of the angles, it'll give me 180 degrees if it is a triangle. If you don't get it, that means you did something wrong. Maybe you added wrong, or you wrote the angles incorrectly. Maybe there's an error. All right. So now, last but not least, let's work on an obtuse. So think of obtuse, big fat angle, right? A huge angle. So if you look at an obtuse, right? Very simple. A triangle with one angle larger than a right, with one angle larger than 90 degrees or larger than a right angle. So if we look at the example here, I have a 40-degree angle, which is an acute angle. I have a 20-degree angle, which is an acute angle, but then I have this ultra fat, I like to call it, a huge 120-degree angle, which is greater than 90 degrees, which will automatically identify as an obtuse angle. So the moment you see a large either symbol or you see a number, a degree that is greater than 90, it'll automatically be identified as an obtuse angle. And once again, let's test out 120 plus 40 plus 20. 2 plus 4 is 6, plus 2 is 8, 1. Once again, 180 degrees. All the triangles angles added together will always give you 180 degrees. Never fails, okay? So now, how do I identify? So now I'm gonna show you guys, I'm gonna give you guys an example on how to identify a triangle. So in our work or on our test or whenever you come across a triangle, it'll ask you to identify. So I'm going to draw you, sorry. I need Ms. Romero to help me with art because I'm not the best artist. So here I have a triangle. It has two markings, which we know that the markings or the dashes mean that they are congruent. We have sides, right? This would be centimeters. And then we have our angle that would be how would I put it? Let's see. We can make it, should be 29 degrees. This would be, let's see, 71 degrees. This would be 8 degrees. Okay, so here we have a triangle. Does it really matter if it tells us exactly how many centimeters each of those sides are? Not really, because the first thing we're going to identify a triangle is by its sides. And if I go back to my notes or go back to what I just what I showed you earlier, if I have two congruent sides, a triangle that has two congruent sides, that'll automatically, let's go back, let's see, that'll automatically make it a what? It would be considered an isosceles triangle. All right. So just the fact that I have two congruent sides, I can automatically call it an isosceles triangle. Now I'm not done. So I identified it by its sides. Now I need to identify it by its angles. So now let me look at the angles. I have an angle of 71 degrees, 80 degrees, and 29 degrees. All of those sound like what? They're all less than 90 degrees. If they are less than 90 degrees, that means they are acute angles. So we would identify it as an acute triangle because it has all angles less than 90 degrees. So my final classification of this triangle will be an isosceles acute triangle. All right, and I'm done. Okay, so that would be one example. I'm gonna show you one more example before I end the video, and then hopefully you guys can get onto your classwork. All right, so last but not least, let's do another one. Let's see. That was a bad triangle there. All right. All right, so here I have another triangle, three sides, triangle. Now, how can I identify this triangle? Okay, first and foremost, I need to identify it by its sides. Okay, so by its sides, it can either be equilateral, which means all sides are congruent, isosceles, like the example we just did, two sides are congruent, or a scalene triangle, which means no sides are congruent. They are all different lengths. So if I look at this one, this side right here would be 7 inches. This side right here would be 5 inches, and then we have this bottom one, which would be 2 inches. They are all different. So if they are all different, the proper way of classifying this would be a scalene triangle, right? So right now it's a scalene triangle. So now I need to identify by its angles, and I'll be done. And now I don't know what angle this is. That's a mystery. And I don't know what that angle is either. But what do know? I do know I have a little box symbol there. And like I taught you, if you see a little box symbol as an angle, that'll automatically tell you that it is 90 degrees, which would be a right angle. So my final classification of this, just by helping me with that angle, will be a scalene right triangle. And we are done. Okay, guys, I really hope the video helped you out. Guys, when I'm trying to make your lives easier, so please, when I assign the classwork on forms, I know it's easy just to click, but please take your time. I don't want to be reassigning. This is a pretty easy concept. Just makes you guys just try to think, pay attention, be patient, and don't try to rush things. Okay, all right, guys, continue to be safe. Love you guys. Bye.